Mend with me. Hi, my name is Lauren. I teach visible mending, and today I'm going to show you one way you can address a fraying cuff. We're using our wash away sashiko inspired persimmon flower pattern, blue thread, a needle, scissors, iron, and patch fabric. The first thing I'm going to do is take a measurement of how big of a patch I want to make. Not only is the edge of the sleeve cuff fraying, but it's also kind of tearing from where it meets the sleeve as well. So I'm going to make a patch large enough to cover both of those areas. To start, I'm going to cut down the large pattern that I have to a smaller piece. Each line is 1/4 inch, making every 2 dashes you see 1 inch, and that's just an easy way to get an idea of how big of a pattern you need. Here I'm using a thrifted linen shirt. I am using LDH rotary cutter. It's the same brand as my scissors. If you want to go back and take a screenshot, they're amazing. Highly recommend. When I'm working with pieces of clothing, I like to cut little panels off and it's easier to work with. I'm using my mat and my ruler to measure how big of a patch I want. And once it's cut out and ironed nice and flat, I am turning in all the unfinished edges and pressing them down. A little trick I like to use is cutting off all the corners where the two pieces of fabric meet and fold over on one another. This just lessens the bulk. I want to talk a moment about the tailor's ham that you see me use in all my videos. This is a sewing tool. It's traditionally used to press curved seams. I use it a lot for ironing, for pressing, and for separating and shaping my clothing. I realized that my patch was too big, so I cut a little bit off. Anyway, you can find them on your craft stores or on Shmamazon or anywhere they sell sewing notions, but they're very, very useful. Highly recommend. I'm going to attach the patch to the sleeve on the wrong side of my jacket. So I turn my sleeve inside out, and I am laying the right side of my patch fabric on the wrong side of my sleeve fabric, and I'm pinning it in place. I'm using white thread. This isn't sewing thread, this is thin embroidery floss. It's about the same thickness as one piece of embroidery floss, or maybe 2. I just wanted something dainty and something you couldn't see because the stitching for the sashiko is going to be the star of the show. I used the running stitch and got as close to that pressed crease as I could. So when I folded over my patch, where the crease was already ironed is the part that folds over. Once the patch is flipped up back to its right side, I fold over the extra fabric that's meant to fold over the edge of the cuff, and I am just pinning everything in place. I am a straight pins girly. I will pin everything in place so nothing moves and I don't have to worry about it. It's just how I work. Again, I'm using the running stitch, and the same white thread is just continuing on from when I sewed on the first edge of my patch. I finish one side of my patch and I stop to iron everything in place and just make sure that the patch isn't going crooked or anything like that, or there's not going to be any extra fabric. I just want to make sure that it looks nice and neat. Once I had 2 sides of my patch sewn on, I decided to flip my sleeve back to the right side and really take time to pin in place the edge that was going over my sleeve, since this is the part you're going to see. I always like to take extra time to do it like this because how you sew it in place is how it lives, and it's a lot of work to go back and undo it. I decided to sew with what once was the wrong side of my project facing me because I wanted to make sure I got every part of the edge of this cuff and that it looked nice and neat. And then I continued down the last side of my patch with my white thread. When you get to the end, all you will do is tie an over-under knot. I like to send my needle through my fabric a couple times before tying a knot just to make sure everything's just nice and secure. You will snip it away, and technically this is a mend. This is a visible mend. It looks really nice like this. In both areas of weakness, they're covered by this nice cotton fabric, but I am going to add additional embroidery on it. And this is to really reinforce the area. Every stitch I'm making on this sashiko pattern is tacking my patch fabric to my denim. For this, I'm using a darker color blue. I wanted this pattern to stand out. That's why I used a white cotton patch and white thread. I tie a knot at the end of my thread and begin on the inside of my sleeve at the beginning of the pattern, wherever you want to start. And you will use the running stitch to cover every single dash, working in one direction until you get to the end of the line. And from under your project, you'll skip down to the next line and embroider in the other direction. You continue to go back and forth until the entire project is covered with horizontal dashes. And this is the part where I skip down to the next line. And this really didn't take too long. Obviously the part on the sleeve and the patch was a lot easier to push my needle through than the areas that had all the cuff material. This is just a more realistic shot of how I would sit and embroider this. Through these areas that are pretty tough, you're making more of a straight stitch than really doing the running stitch. And with projects like these, I do recommend sashiko thread because it is meant to be pulled through multiple layers of tough materials like this, where embroidery floss could separate on you. Once all of the horizontal lines have been embroidered, all you're going to do is start embroidering all the vertical lines. In the same manner, you embroider up, skip over, embroider down, skip over, embroider up until the entire thing is covered with stitches. And when you're finished, you have this pattern that is just as clean from the inside as it is the out. To remove the pattern, wash and dry your clothing as normal. All that's left is embroidery. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this useful, and I'll catch you on the next.